They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But on August 23, 1305, King Edward I of England served it burning hot in front of thousands of screaming spectators. What you're about to hear isn't just history. It's a masterclass in how far power will go to crush the human spirit and how badly that can backfire. Picture this: a man stripped naked, bound with rope, dragged behind horses through streets thick with human waste and rotting food. His crime? Refusing to kneel. His punishment? Something so brutal that even medieval England, a place where cruelty was currency, would remember it for centuries. This is the story of how William Wallace became immortal by dying in the most horrific way imaginable. But before we get to that unforgettable August morning, you need to understand who this man really was. Because Hollywood got some things right, but the truth? The truth is somehow both darker and more inspiring. William Wallace wasn't born into greatness. No castle, no fortune, no royal blood running through his veins. He was the second son of a minor Scottish knight, which in medieval terms meant he was practically invisible. While nobles played chess with crowns and kingdoms, Wallace grew up in the shadows, watching his homeland become a pawn in someone else's game. Scotland in the late 1200s was a wounded animal, and across the border, King Edward VI circled like a predator who'd caught the scent of blood. Edward wasn't called the Hammer of the Scots for nothing. When Scotland's king died without a clear heir, Edward saw opportunity where others saw tragedy. He swooped in, claiming the right to choose Scotland's next ruler, turning proud Scottish nobles into puppets dancing on English strings. Most bent the knee. Most chose survival over sovereignty, but not everyone. And certainly not the man who would soon become Edward's greatest nightmare. The spark that lit Wallace's fire wasn't politics or ambition. It was personal. The English didn't just occupy Scotland. They terrorized it. When they killed someone Wallace loved, whether it was family, a wife, or friends, something fundamental changed in him. Pain has a way of clarifying things. It burned away any hesitation, any doubt, leaving only purpose behind. In 1297, Wallace did something nobody expected. With no formal training, no army, no resources, he united farmers, merchants, and outcasts into a fighting force. At Stirling Bridge, against impossible odds, he didn't just defeat an English army. He humiliated it. Knights in shining armor, professional soldiers, all sent running by a nobody from nowhere. For one shining moment, Scotland believed again. And England learned to fear the name Wallace. If you're loving this descent into history's most brutal moments, make sure you're subscribed because what comes next makes this look like a warm-up. But here's what the movies don't tell you about being a revolutionary. It's lonely, exhausting. Most of the Scottish nobles who should have stood with Wallace made peace with Edward instead. They chose their estates over their country. Wallace spent years fighting not just English soldiers, but Scottish indifference. He became something between a man and a myth, appearing from forests and hills to strike at the occupation, then vanishing again like smoke. Every hero story has a traitor, and Wallace's came wrapped in Scottish plaid. Sir John Menteith, a fellow Scot, sold him out near Glasgow. There was no dramatic final battle, no glorious last stand. Just betrayal, quiet and complete. One moment Wallace was free, the next he was in chains, and Edward finally had the prize he'd been hunting for years. Now, most kings would have simply executed Wallace and been done with it. A quick beheading, maybe a public hanging. But Edward wasn't most kings. He didn't just want Wallace dead. He wanted him destroyed. He wanted to make an example so terrifying that no one would ever dare follow in Wallace's footsteps. He wanted to kill not just a man, but an idea. Wallace's journey from Scotland to London took weeks. It wasn't transportation. It was psychological warfare. They paraded him through every English town along the way, displayed like a captured beast. People spat on him, threw garbage, screamed insults. Children were lifted up to see the mighty Scottish rebel reduced to this filthy, chained creature. But here's the thing. Through all of it, Wallace never broke. His body was broken, but his eyes, witnesses said, his eyes stayed defiant until the very end. Westminster Hall, August 23rd. The trial was pure theater. Wallace stood accused of treason, of murder, of crimes against the crown. The judges had prepared their verdict before he ever entered the room. But Wallace, even knowing his fate was sealed, refused to play along. His final words in that courtroom cut through the noise. "I could not be a traitor to Edward, for I was never his subject." It was truth spoken to power, and it made the authorities rage. The sentence they read out wasn't execution. It was orchestrated torture, designed to last as long as humanly possible. Hanging, but stopped before death. Disembowelment, while still conscious. Castration. Burning of organs, beheading, quartering. Each part of the punishment chosen specifically to maximize suffering and symbolize the destruction of a traitor. This was called hanged, drawn, and quartered, and it was reserved for those the crown wanted to make unforgettable examples of. If you are still watching, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Dawn broke over London, and the city awoke to the smell of fresh timber. Carpenters had been working through the night, building the stage for this monstrous spectacle. By the time the sun fully rose, Smithfield was packed. Thousands upon thousands of people, from nobles in fine clothes to beggars in rags, all gathered for the show. Street vendors walked through the crowd, selling food and drink. This wasn't somber. This was entertainment. Wallace was tied to a wooden hurdle, a rough frame that would be dragged behind horses. From the Tower of London through the main streets of the city, they pulled him across cobblestones and through mud. Each stone that caught his body tore his skin. Each pothole jarred his bones. The crowd followed like a wave, some shouting, some silent, all watching as a legend was dragged to his death. At Smithfield, the scaffold waited. They hauled Wallace up and placed a noose around his neck. The rope went taut. His feet left the ground. But this wasn't meant to kill him, just to bring him to the edge of death. To starve his brain of oxygen until his vision dimmed and his lungs screamed. Then, before he could slip into unconsciousness, they cut him down. What happened next would haunt England's conscience for generations. The executioner approached with a blade. With Wallace still fully conscious, still breathing, still aware, they sliced open his abdomen. They reached inside and pulled out his intestines, organ by organ, holding each one up for the crowd to see before casting it into a fire. The smell of burning flesh mixed with the morning air. Some in the crowd turned away. Others cheered. But everyone there knew they were witnessing something beyond normal execution. This was savagery dressed as justice. Wallace's face, drained of color, twisted in agony, but his eyes stayed open. Even as they mutilated his body, even as they destroyed him piece by piece, he wouldn't give them the satisfaction of begging. When his breathing finally became labored, shallow, the executioner raised the axe one final time. The blade fell. Wallace's head separated from his body, and blood pooled on the scaffold like dark wine. But Edward's revenge didn't end with death. The executioner took up his tools again and dismembered Wallace's body, dividing it into 5 pieces. The head was preserved in tar and mounted on a spike atop London Bridge, where it would remain for years, a constant reminder to anyone who crossed that bridge of what happened to those who defied England. The 4 quarters of his body were sent to the corners of Scotland: Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth. Each piece displayed publicly, each one a warning. Rebel against England. And this is your fate. Edward believed he had won. He thought that by destroying Wallace so completely, by making his death so horrific, he would kill the spirit of Scottish resistance. He thought fear would succeed where armies had failed. He was wrong, because something unexpected happened in the years after Wallace's execution. Instead of frightening Scotland into submission, His death did the opposite. It became a rallying point. Mothers told their children about the man who refused to bow, even as they tore him apart. Soldiers whispered his name before battle like a prayer. His brutalized body, scattered across Scotland, became a map of resistance rather than surrender. Within a year, Robert the Bruce, who had once wavered in his commitment to Scottish independence, picked up the mantle Wallace had dropped. Inspired by Wallace's sacrifice, Bruce led Scotland to victories that eventually secured its independence. The man Edward tried to erase became the foundation upon which Scottish freedom was built. Every battle won, every English retreat, every step towards sovereignty, all of it carried Wallace's name forward. Here's the devastating irony. Edward wanted to make Wallace disappear. Instead, he made him eternal. By choosing cruelty over mercy, by making his death a spectacle, Edward ensured that Wallace would never be forgotten. The execution that was meant to end a rebellion became its most powerful fuel. Even now, more than 7 centuries later, Wallace's story resonates. Not because of how he died, but because of what he refused to surrender. His body was broken, dismembered, displayed. But his spirit? That proved impossible to kill. Every generation that faces oppression, every person who stands up when standing up seems impossible, they're all in some way children of William Wallace. The teared head that watched over London Bridge from its spike wasn't a warning. It became a promise that some things are worth dying for. That tyranny, no matter how powerful, contains the seeds of its own destruction. That you can kill a man, but you can't kill what he stands for. If this story made you think, made you feel, made you understand history differently, then hit that subscribe button. History isn't just dates and dead people. It's lessons written in blood and courage. Drop a comment telling me what historical figure we should explore next. And if you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person who appreciates the raw, unfiltered truth of the past. William Wallace died in pieces, but in death, he became whole in a way he never could have in life. He became an idea, and ideas, unlike flesh, can't be drawn, quartered, or killed. They only grow stronger in the trying. That's the real horror of Wallace's execution. Not what they did to his body, but what they accidentally did to his legacy. They tried to create a cautionary tale and instead wrote an anthem. Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots, ended up forging the very weapon that would ultimately free Scotland from English rule. So the next time someone tells you that one person can't make a difference, remember the man who died refusing to kneel, and the nation that rose because he fell. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and never forget that history's greatest lessons often come from its darkest moments.